What's the most contested stone on the earth? It's right here. We're going to talk about what this is and its significance in these last days. Okay, guys, there's no question what this is. All right, but what we're going to talk about is what is this really? We have to go through some ancient architecture, history, what has transpired with this building in this facility. I'm going to make a very strong statement right from the get-go. Okay, this is the seat of Satan. All right. Now, the first thing many of you will say to me is, Leeland, no, the seat of Satan is in Berlin. It's the Pergamon altar. That is a altar as well, but this also had a seat of Jupiter. There was a temple of Jupiter on this rock. And what is the most contested rock in the world? It is this one. Right here is where they say the altar is. Okay, but guys, we're gonna have to do some history. We're gonna have to go back in time. We're gonna have to look at what happened here. What were the people thinking when they built this? What was going on? And we've showed you before that the kathisma, the seat, okay, it's the harlot's seat. All right. It's not too far from here, between Jerusalem and Bethlehem, all right, showed us this pattern, and this pattern is a church, all right? And the church had certain aspects of their architecture that went into this stone, okay? And that information is what we must research, okay? We must research, we must do some history, we must do some studying to see what is going on here, guys. What is this? Why is this the most contested stone in the world? We've shown you before the preparations for the third temple. We've shown you the Sanhedrin synagogue, which Jesus said the synagogue is needed to build the third temple. We've shown you the coin. We've shown you the preparations of the red heifer. We have a whole playlist on this. And now we're going to talk about the seat, okay? The seat and what this place is. Now, if you guys don't know, inside of the Dome of the Rock is a stone. It has a couple names. The Jews call it the foundation stone, and the Muslims call it the stone by which Mohammad ascended to heaven. Okay, so that's why they are contending for the stone that's inside. But this stone predates the Muslims, okay? We've already maintained that the place where we're standing, the place where we're looking at here is a Roman fort. But what did the early Christians do here? Okay, they actually built a church, because you don't see this 8-sided pattern in mosques. Okay, of course it is a shrine, and they built on the foundations of an early church called Hagia Sophia. Sophia is wisdom. Okay, so something is going on here to where it's either the harlot seat or the seat of Satan. Now let's look at Revelation. And when we look at Revelation, we've pointed out before in Revelation to the church at Smyrna. At Smyrna, we saw that these what they say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So we've shown you that by the western wall. And then to the church at Pergamos, then what we have is, I know your works, where you dwell, where Satan's seat is. Okay? Guys, this is Satan's seat right here. Okay? They're not building a third temple in Berlin, guys. Okay? This synagogue is going about building a third temple. And we know that in 2 Thessalonians that, he will go into the temple, the son of perdition, okay? But look what it says. To the church of Pergamos, I know your works, where you dwell, even where Satan's seat is. This is Satan's seat. Hold fast my name. You have not denied my faith. Even those days where Antiochus, now I'm going to have to do another video, but he's one of the two witnesses. My faithful martyr, or faithful witness, who was slain where Satan dwells. Now we know the two witnesses are slain where the Lord was crucified. Okay, so that's Antiochus. All right. Now, let's just keep going real quick. We're going to get more into this later. But see how it says here, but I have a few things against you because you have the doctrine of Balaam. Now, this deals with the Exodus. Okay, in the book of Numbers, in chapters 22 through 24, I believe, it talks about Balaam. So that's what we must overcome at these times, is the spirit of Balaam. But what? Satan's seat, where Satan dwells. Let's do a little history. Jerusalem is destroyed in 70 AD. Then there's another Jewish revolt called the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 AD. And they're also defeated by the Romans. And when they are, 135, you can see Hadrian then makes Jerusalem a pagan Roman city called Aelia Capitolina. When he does, he puts a temple for Jupiter. And we know that this was in the Roman fortress on top, okay? And what we have is an architectural layout of a similar temple of Jupiter that's in Baalbek, Lebanon. So on this site, which I'll give you the link, it is bible.ca, they have superimposed the architectural layout of what this temple looked like in Lebanon over, interesting enough, the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. And you can see that when they come together, they line up perfectly with this portion of a temple structure with pillars lining up with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. So the first thing we have up here after the destruction of Jerusalem is a Roman city, and in it there is a temple for Jupiter. Okay, and again, this is Zeus, okay, and when he's telling us about the Pergamon altar, that is an altar to Zeus, okay, as a type and shadow of something that we would look for in the last days that would meet a similar description. And here's another similar layout architecturally of what this temple to Jupiter was. Okay, and you can see it's a very large facility and everything else. But then what we have is we have the destruction of pagan Roman Jerusalem, and then we have a Christian Roman Jerusalem. At which point we then get a new building up here built by the Christians. We have another video on this, but this is the Kathisma Church that is in between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And we have a almost identical situation where we have 8 sides, okay, and a stone in the middle. So the early church would memorialize sites like this. Okay, we have one like Capernaum and you know, a stone. So they say, okay, this is where Mary sat on her way from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. And so they said, oh, this is the stone, and then they built this whole church around it. Okay, we got a whole other video on that. But you can see what's going on here is this 8-sided layout with 3 layers and a stone in the middle, right? Okay, well, that's exactly what we see with the building of the Dome of the Rock. Okay, so this stone, again, is the main feature. So when the Christians came, they said, okay, this stone that they found there is the feature. And then what they did is they began to do it with their architectural layout of 8 sides, right? And then they did something called a crypt. All right, guys, here's some rare footage of the foundation stone and crypt. Okay, remember how I was saying there's a crypt? Well, you could see what they're saying. These are steps leading to the Well of Souls. Now, why in the world would Muslims call a crypt under the foundation stone the Well of Souls? Well, the person getting this, as you can see, he's talking about the Ark of the Covenant, he's talking about the Holy of Holies. He's under the belief that this is the Holy of Holies. Okay, so we'll just make that. Now here's the inside. And you can see scaffolding and everything, and that's the foundation stone. But that was excellent footage of the crypt. And the reason we're pointing out this crypt and this altar is we can see that that actually goes back to the Christians. And we'll show you examples of how they did this in many other sites. Here's some other views of just the inside of the shrine and the architecture. But there we have the crypt called the Well of Souls. Why would they call it the Well of Souls, guys? They're not reading the book of Revelation, but it's exactly what the book of Revelation says. Revelation chapter 6, the 5th seal. It talks about an altar, and the souls cry out from under the altar. And they've even called it the Well of Souls. Okay, here we are at El Arona Church. It's a French church here. And as we walk in, this is a reconstruction of what the architecture would have been at the time of the Byzantine churches. So what we're doing is we're entering here. This is the outside entrance to the church, which you can see inside. All right, here we are at this rebuilt, for the outside at least, Byzantine church. What we have here is we have some steps that are leading up, and we have architectural elements taken from different scriptures, different things. So for example, we see steps here. These steps are part of the first temple built by Solomon. Had a throne and had 6 steps leading up to the throne. And his throne had a round back, as represented here. Now, what they've since added is an altar. That you see as an altar is part of the book of Revelation. And the book of Revelation says there's an altar and that the souls cry out from under the altar. So this is a crypt. Now, more than likely what happened is when the Christians were on the Fortress Antonia, they probably did the same thing where they had a rock like this, and then they built the crypt underneath it. And they memorialized that rock as a place where Jesus Christ was judged by Herod. So they believed that that stone was a memorial of the place where he was interrogated by Herod. And so they did what they did with all their other churches and built a crypt underneath what the Jews call the foundation stone. Okay, but either way, these things are an altar. So the Christians looked at it as an altar, and then underneath that altar there would be this crypt. All the churches have this characteristic. And then you have a crypt, or a thing that you go in down below. Here it is from the other side. And guys, I really find this disturbing, and I really don't like going into these things. But I just want to show you, what it looks like. And this is why, when the church is apostate like this, this is why this is the seat of Satan. Okay, now that is a representation of his throne. And what they would have done is had the elders, see all those pillars behind it? Typically those would have been for the 24 elders Okay, but the church started sitting in these seats. Guys, that seat is only for Christ. If we read in Chronicles about the throne, this is actually an accurate kind of depiction of it. You see how the back is rounded? That's what it says. It's rounded. Okay, just like that. And that's what they've done. They've kind of represented that just like his throne. But in these Byzantine churches, this is what they'd have. And then like the kind of high priest guy or bishop would sit there, and then there'd be a circle, many times a circle, this one is square, around him. Okay, and this is the Holy of Holies. Guys, only the Lamb is worthy to open the seal. Whenever men start sitting in thrones, this is not good. And we know it's Lucifer that wants to sit in the seat of the Most High. And so what he does is he deceives the people, and they end up, sitting in thrones, acting like they're God. So what we consider is that the foundation stone was both an altar and a throne. Okay, that's what the ancients would have considered it. So the Muslims memorialized it as a place where Muhammad ascended, and the Christians recognized it as a place where Christ was judged by Herod and made. So kind of picture this as the foundation stone with the crypt underneath. That's what the church there called Hagia Sophia. Okay, that's what that foundation stone was considered by the early Christians. Here we have a nice model 3D of the Dome of the Rock. In it you can see the layers. Down below, the foundation stone. And again, sharing characteristics that we do see in Byzantine churches. Okay, behind you can see one of the beast signs here on this. There's another one over here. In the Dome of the Rock, these are just little marble pieces of the building. But if we look, you can see very, very crazy looking look at that guy. Now, some of you may be asking, where will the third temple be built? Here are the plans, the architectural plans of the sanctuary, and will it be on the Dome of the Rock? Well, let's just watch and see. These are the architectural plans and a 3D animation of the third temple from the Temple Institute. But, guys, the Lord Jesus said, "When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place." Now, a holy place is a portion of the temple, a space in the temple, okay? And we saw in Revelation that I know your works where you dwell, even where Satan's seat is, okay? These are the things that were spoken of by all the prophets. Ezekiel 8:3. And towards the door of the inner gate that looks towards the north, there was a seat at the image of jealousy, which provokes to jealousy. Ezekiel 28:2. You have said, I am God. I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas. I sit, yet you are a man and not God. And you set your heart as the heart of God. 2 Thessalonians 2:4, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or is worshipped, so that he, as God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Revelation 13, and the beast gave him his power and his seat. Okay? Isaiah 14:3, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the throne of the congregation in the sides of the north. Okay? So guys, as we look here, you can see the holy place. That's where the menorah is and everything else. But then what happens is there's, look at the passageways, and there's all this kind of staircases. Okay, look at that, see? Now, how this is precisely over the foundation stone, it's hard to tell. But now what's happening is, look, we're on the roof. This is very high. And as it's on the roof, there's a whole other section, a whole other tower. You see in front of us is a ladder, and then the person must climb this ladder. So this is all very, very different, obviously, than the temple that's described, the first temple that David got the plans for, and then the second temple. And now we're on the roof, and here is a veil. Okay. So let's wait and see. Let's watch.
The holiest spot in the world, only one man steps once a year. Picture number 34. The high priest on the Day of Atonement. Actually, over the course of the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol entered into the Holy of Holies 4 times. The first time he entered was to offer the incense, as is depicted in the painting at right by the exit. The high priest would place the incense on top of the foundation stone, which is the foundation of creation.